welcome to the one and only Team Tszyu.
G'day guys, how are we? Welcome to Talking Boxing. It is Monday, July the 3rd, 2023, and wow, just when you thought there was never a dull moment, well, look at what's happened in the last 48 hours, and of course we were cruising last week. We're talking about the Tim Tszyu fight, what's going to happen with Charlo and everything else, and all hell broke loose on Saturday morning. And we're very, very lucky tonight to have the one man that can maybe give us some answers about what happened in the last 48 hours. I'm talking about the manager of Team Tszyu, Glen Jennings. So Glen will be along to join us shortly. But what happened? You would have seen, if you haven't seen it, my interview with Tszyu Brown that we did on Saturday morning. Both got up. It was on social media. I must admit, I was one of the ones that looked at it and went, oh, geez, they've got the wrong brother. How good are these guys going? I can't remember what it was, Main Event or one of the news channels or whatever, and they were running with the story. And as I said, I had a bit of a chuckle and a snicker and went, geez, Australian boxing press will never learn, will they? They're going to run with this story. They've got the wrong brother and everything else. And here we are. And obviously it was proven to be correct. And we've got Jermell Charlo, who's now skipping the Tim Tszyu fight to take on Canelo Alvarez on September 30th in Las Vegas. So I'm looking forward to speaking with Glen, as I'm sure all you guys are out there as well. It'll be a good opportunity for you to ask some questions of Glen. I'm not sure whether he's done an interview or anything since then. I've been sort of offline the last couple of days. But, geez, I'm really looking forward to asking him, well, the big questions. What we're all wondering is, geez, what happened in that 48-hour block where he did say on an overseas outlet, D-Style Boxing, that the fight was all but ready to go and just waiting to be announced. And within that 48-hour period, we have no fight. And Tim, unfortunately, has been left at the altar. So as I said, really looking forward to speaking with Glen. I just texted with him today, and he said he'd love to come on and have a chat with all you out there. So, as I said, if you've got a question or a comment even, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of you out there with some serious questions to ask. Well, here's your opportunity, because as I said, I don't think I've seen him actually comment publicly yet. I might be wrong. If I am wrong, correct me there. But, wow. So if you don't know, you've been living under the proverbial boxing rock in the last couple of days. As I said, Saturday morning, it just came from nowhere. Team Tszyu, as I'm sure Glen will announce when he comes on soon, completely blindsided by this announcement. And it just came out of nowhere that Jermell Charlo, as I said, was all lined up to fight Tim. Was looking like October or mid-October in Las Vegas. Everything seemed set. No one knew what was coming, and then bang, blindsided by a massive announcement that Jermell Charlo is not going to be ready to fight Canelo on that date, and Jermell Charlo is going to step in. So let's see what he has to say. We've got Batman there, Team Batman. How are you, mate? I'm sure you're watching the interview on was it Thursday morning Australian time on D-Style Boxing when Glen was interviewed and spoke about this. So, as I said, within 48 hours, it's all gone pear-shaped. A crazy announcement, that's for sure. Yes, Paul, welcome to the show, mate. Can't wait to hear Glen's take. Yep, you and me both, mate. Salute to you, Steve. How are you, mate? Thanks for coming on the show. Paul again says, bloody pissed off, as is everyone in Australia. Well, geez, isn't it amazing that, well, as I said, we're all sitting pretty, all rubbing the hands together. Some of you, and I know I was one of them, were looking at maybe airfares and accommodation for Vegas around that time. Well, that's just all gone up in smoke for the time being, and that's why it's really important that we wait for some official sort of statements from Glen, because as I said, no one knows anything was going on more than obviously the manager of Tim. I'm looking forward to hearing what Tim had to say about this. No Limit. I wonder what the conversations were like between No Limit and PBC Boxing. I've got a feeling it might have been a little bit frosty. So let's see what they had to say. Salute, Lyndon. Hope you're well, mate. You too, Carl. Welcome to the show, mate. Always great to have you along. Carl says, what have we got there? With PBC logic, I'm looking forward to Stephen Fulton versus Canelo. Well, mate, anything's possible. And look, I did say in the interview the other day, or my conversation with Tszyu the other day, thanks for everyone for watching that. We had some really good numbers for people watching that YouTube video. I haven't seen it. Check it out. Who could be next? I mean, anything's possible, basically. But yeah, I did say to Tszyu that I for one have been caught napping just like the rest of you guys out there as well. Jules says, "What the hell, boys? Oz boxing should be cancelled for the year. Respect for Tim." Well, look, I know I'm sort of laughing about it, but I'm 100% still in disbelief about what's happened. Look, it is boxing. I was just going to say what Taszyu and I spoke about on Saturday. It is boxing. This does happen. You've got to remember this is a business. And sometimes feelings have to be hurt. Agreements have to be backtracked on. Fingers have to be crossed behind the back when shaking hands, all this sort of stuff. But look, the one thing that I will say is probably two things. I do really feel for, obviously, Tim himself. He's got to be absolutely devastated and shattered by it. But what I will say is Glen, who shouldn't be too far away now, well, I've got no doubt, and I'm sure he'll back me up here, would have said to Tim, hey, look, no use crying over spilt milk. We have to pick ourselves up, refocus on the next target, which I'm really interested to hear what that will be, and we have to move on. Nothing we can do about it now. We can only do things about what we can control. And I've got no doubt in the last 48 hours, Glenn and the No Limit team have been plotting about the next move for Tim. And I've got no doubt that within a couple of weeks, you'll have an announcement what's next. I mean, you've seen it in the past this year on two occasions. They haven't sat around and moped and felt sorry for themselves. They've got straight back on the horse, had two fights in that time where they could have easily sat around. I'm glad he hasn't sat around, I will say, obviously, because would have been an even harder pill to swallow if he had been sitting around for 6 months and then this happened. So, it's not a good situation at all. Bluey, how are you, mate? Great to see the Carlton logo up there. I've got to say, after a pretty shitty weekend, it was great to have a win yesterday. I know it was only Hawthorn, but a win's a win. That's 2 10-goal performances in a row from the Blues. So, but we're not talking about that tonight. We're on the boxing. So, what else have we got there? Yes, Batman. What have we got there? We've got a few coming in. Mr. Pads is there. And Glenn is about to come on now, mate. So let's get him on. Let's have a look. We'll get Glenn assigned to a camera there. All right, without any further ado, manager of Team Tszyu 2, Glen Jennings. Thanks for joining the show, mate. Really appreciate you coming on.
Good to be here, mate. How are you?
Well, like most of Aussie boxing fans, mate, I must admit it's been a pretty shitty weekend. Can you, look, I know you've probably done the rounds on the weekend, a lot of phone calls and everything, but I know it's a silly question, but how is the team? How, more importantly, is Tim? And how's the last 48 hours been?
It's all relevant, isn't it? I mean, it's been a pretty ordinary weekend for all of us. As you know, mate, we got broadsided, probably the best I've seen in anything that I've been involved in business. Absolute no inkling of this happening, Lyndon. And I think it was only just a couple of days before I did a little podcast in the United States where we were very comfortable, very confident that the dates were to be selected between 2 dates in October. And we were literally just waiting for that announcement, mate. And then to wake up the next couple of days later to a social media story that at first I couldn't quite get my head around. Like everybody, a bit shocked. Matty Rose and I spoke very early that morning and then spoke with Tim. And the reality then hits that, the kid's dream had been pulled out from underneath him literally overnight. So, yeah, not a fun thing to deal with, mate, but that's boxing today, unfortunately.
So, Glenn, you just mentioned the show on Thursday morning. It was Australian time, the D-Style boxing show. I've been on that a couple of times myself. It's a great show. Check it out. Now, like a lot of people out there watching that show, it was a great interview, by the way, like D-Style and I think it's Calix, really good guys. Know this stuff.
Fellas. Terrific blokes.
And you did say, I think it's all about to happen. We're just waiting on Charlo's team to announce it. What the hell happened in 48 hours? I know you've just said that it's just come out the blue. Did you have any inkling at all what might be happening?
None whatsoever, mate. None, and I mean that 100% in all honesty. None whatsoever. We were in a good place. We had already started to plan our approach on the United States camp. Matt and I were talking several times every day on updates, and even Matt Rose on that morning was like me. He said, We didn't even know what to say, let alone how to sort of digest that something could happen that quickly. But I think after a couple of days of sitting and taking it in and digesting it, I sort of try to put it into a picture for some people because it's difficult. These things are very difficult for the average Joe to get a head around. But I think in a nutshell, mate, try to imagine the Charlo brothers are sitting in the lounge room at Jermell's place, and sitting on the coffee table, there's an offer in writing of 10 million bucks to fight Canelo. And Jermell says to his brother Jermell, I'm not up for it, mate. For whatever reason, almost irrelevant. I'm just not up for it. And Jermell says, wow, that's a lot of money. I think I might have a crack at that. Now, as we know, he did, and he took it. And I can't really blame the guy, Lyndon. I don't have a lot of malice towards Jermell, apart from the fact that he's mucked us around for 12 months, ever since this journey started on the Undisputed. And we did everything by the book, no limits, and our team, everything by the book. We gave them every opportunity to have the recovery, the healing time, the hand, all of that. And we stayed patient, but we stayed busy. And so our climate changed a little bit because Tim was getting better and better, and Jermell probably getting a little bit lesser and lesser ready for a fight. But the burning part for me more lies with Canelo, to be honest. I mean, what Canelo wants in boxing today, Canelo gets at the detriment of everybody else that's working their ass off to get their fighters the opportunities they can. But it is United States, and it hasn't changed from Kostya's days. This stuff was happening then. It'll continue on forever because money talks. And when it's big money like that, it will shift any foundation of any negotiation or any contract, because some contracts are worth breaking for 10 million. It's almost bizarre that we don't really think like that in Australia, but in the US, that's normal business.
Was there anything actually agreed to as far as any written agreement or signed agreement, Glenn, or was it all just verbal?
No, the fight was signed, as you know, pre-January 28.
Yep.
And the only reason that contract could be null and void was if for some reason the fight was cancelled. It never was. We gave them agreed to an exemption. He had a medical exemption for a recovery period, which we granted. We said no problem. It could happen to any fighter any day. So that's what I mean when I say we did everything by the book. So the contracts were still there in place, mate. And as you know, the WBO made an order not that long ago, Lyndon, that the fight had to be fought before the 29th of September. And that was backed up then by a second run by the WBO that said, consistent with Tim Tszyu beating Ocampo, then that fight has to take place before 29 September. So there was no legal enforcement or indication from anybody that we had a problem. And as you now know, I don't think anyone knew about it. I think they sidelined everybody and the deal got done. And look, we were assuming the deal got done. Nobody's seen anything signed in that regard either. But right now it's Charlo versus Canelo, and Team Tszyu have dusted ourselves off and had several good meetings and positively moving on. And our focus shifts somewhat now to the WBO decision this week on whether or not they strip Charlo and Tim becomes the full champ from interim to full, and the scenarios that spin off from that should that not happen. So our goal's a little different now. We'll go to Undisputed, but we'll have to do it belt by belt.
So that was going to be one of my next questions with the WBO. Have you had any input back from the WBO? You know what's happening, or just waiting on them to make a ruling?
I think they're like everyone, mate. They're a professional organisation. We put our hands in over to them because of their orders and everything that they've placed. There's some precedent there, but ultimately they will meet midweek and have a discussion. And they're dealing with Matty Rose direct now on this, and I've moved on now back to working with the boys and getting our next phase ready. So Matty's all over it. He's representing us, and he's representing No Limits and all of Australia to get the best outcome of this mess for Tim. And in some respects, mate, there's only two outcomes that can come from it. One would be that they back up and enforce their order and they strip Charlo, and Tim becomes the full champion literally overnight. Option two, Charlo vacates all the belts and says, that's it. For whatever reason, he may not be able to get back to 154. He's too heavy. I don't know. I think once you go to 168, it's a hell of a road to come back.
Yeah, it's pretty
and
tough.
The last one, Lyndon, is the sort of the diamond sitting in the background that should he not be stripped by any sanctioning body, he will go up to 168 and fight. And let's say he loses against Canelo, then literally he comes back to 154 as undisputed. And guess who his mandatory is?
Well, yeah. Well, let's hope that's the case. Let's just rewind just a second. You sort of briefly touched on Saturday morning. So bring us up. Saturday morning, you said you got up, you looked at social media like the rest of us. You thought, oh, these wankers out there, the media, they've got it wrong. They've got the wrong brother. When did the penny drop, and what was the first conversation with No Limit like?
The penny dropped when first of all, I got up and it was there staring, flashing about all over social media. Then I seen a text message from Tim that said, this can't be right, ? So first call was to Tim and said, mate, I need to make a quick call. I'll get back to you, but leave it with me. I spoke to Matt Rose, and Matt Rose literally said to me, I've been on the phone to the WBO, and this is real, mate. This thing's happening, and Charlo has taken the bait, the 10 million, and run.
So the initial one I saw, I think, was the main event on Facebook. So did they know before you knew? And if they did, how did they know before your team knew?
I can't recall if the initial one I seen was an American one that looked like a PBC one, but it wasn't PBC. So somebody had very quickly made up a pretty impressive poster type thing. And so main event followed not long after that, but I'm pretty sure the Americans leaked it out very quickly, and then everybody was just literally in a turmoil. Right up until about 9:30, there was just multiple posts coming out with all different headings on them from all over the place. All over the world was on it. So, and a lot of disbelief, and a lot of people saying, how can this happen? A lot of people and of course, like you said, a lot of people still totally confused, thinking they were talking about Jermell.
And there's a lot of comments on social media about it. I just got to say that, like myself and all the other social media or boxing websites out there, what was going to be a nice cruisy Saturday turned into a frenzy trying to get a video out. I think every man and his dog got some sort of video out. That's how much it took us by surprise. But how about the main person in this circumstance, Glenn, with Tim? You said he messaged you that morning. How's it been 48 hours after that with his mindset at the moment?
Oh, look, the day it broke, mate, the kid was gutted, absolutely gutted. He like all of us, had to take some time to digest this thing, and I guess there's two ways you can deal with it, mate. You can let that pull you down, or you can, and as I always do, I tried to seek a positive out of it right from the get-go, and just reinforce into Tim's mind that mentally they can't hurt us. I said, we're still, as much as they've gone about business in a way that we don't agree with, that's always going to be in front of us. When you fight from Australia and you travel to America, you are always the B-side. It doesn't matter if you hold all the belts, you're still the B-side. And they will treat you with a degree of contempt regardless. So I just reinforced with him that we won't change anything. We will continue on our path of getting ready. I said, you'll go into camp on Monday as you normally would. I said, take the day off, take Alex, go to the beach, do whatever you want to do, but do your best just to not think about it, knowing that he would be. It'd be grinding on him all day. And Tim's Tim. It really only took him 24 hours to understand that it was done, and as such, he's ready to move on. And then the conversations become very positive. Okay, what are we going to do next? I'm revved up. I'm more focused than ever. I don't. Whilst the undisputed was the ultimate dream for me, if it's not happening, I haven't got time to ponder on it. Let's go. And so we shifted then into talking with Igor and Matty Rose and a couple of long chats about where we go from here, and that's where we're at now, mate. Is we're in a bit of a tiny bit of a holding pattern, Lyndon, because of the WBO decision, and then from that we will know exactly where we go.
Yeah, I was just going to say too, is there, I think you might have touched on it before, has there been any contact between Matt and George from No Limit, of course, and the PBC boys?
Yes, they've spoken, mate, and I mean it's the Australian fans almost have to take this into context too, because when PBC, who are one of the biggest players, signed Canelo to a 3-year deal, and we're talking mega millions of dollars. When you consider, let's say we jumped up and down about Tim Tszyu not getting Charlo because Canelo wants it, we don't even rank a ripple in the water. That's the truth of it, mate. It's Tim doesn't hold any belts. He's an absolute contender, and we were confident that he would win them. But the big names right now are both in the United States, Canelo and Charlo. They hold all the straps and they hold all the power. So you can't go on the attack. You've almost got to go systematically and try to work out, okay, it's done. What's the best outcome for us moving forward? Because you can be ostracised just as quickly by going in there and trying to, make so much noise that that's not going to make any difference anyway. So far better to focus on what we can get out of it.
Yeah, well, looking at a lot of the social media and the boxing websites around, everyone's been very sympathetic to Tim's cause. I think he's earned a lot of fans by his willingness to keep busy and take chances, and I think he's got himself a really good fan base all over the world at the moment. I just got a question here for you from Jules again. I think you might have touched on it a little bit earlier, but it says here, who's the next biggest fight for Tim at 154? Will he catch up with Jermell eventually, or does he having move up, does that rule him out forever?
Well, second question, Jermell, that'll be entirely based on what happens against Canelo. I would think if Jermell gets beaten handily and doesn't put up too much of a competition, he may well come back to 154. As you know, it's a big difference in weight, and we'll see. Who knows what these boys are going to weigh on the night, but you can be undisputed at 154. It's difficult to go to 160 and have a win. To go to 168, who knows? But if he has a loss and comes back to 154, we don't know where Tim Tszyu will be by that stage. Tim Tszyu will continue moving forward, but let's be honest, Jermell Charlo could be 12 months before, after the Canelo fight, that we even get an opportunity. So it's not something we're going to sit and wait on. If you look at the current 154 across all the sanctioning bodies, it's not a strong division when you take the Charlo out, and that's probably the key issue. And the problem with Undisputed is that it creates no competition underneath it for a long time. There's no, you don't see a lot of 1 and 2 fights, mandatories fighting number 2, because they're always waiting for their mandatory against the champ. And when the champ's got all of them, you could be waiting a year. So you don't see that level of competition, and that division suffers from it. So and then as for Tim moving up, Lyndon, 160 is not much better, mate. So
no, you're right. I've got a question on that a little bit later. But one solution here, and it's been, I think I said this the other day, is it a matter of taking out someone like a Mendoza or the Russian or whatever it might be? I know there's still a lot to play out with the belts and everything. Does the next target become the winner of Spence Crawford if the Charlo fight is no longer?
Wow. There are so many scenarios. There's about a dozen that we've sort of scribbled out and looked at. Obviously, if Timmy gets to become full champion, he would be the only one outside of Charlo carrying the 154 belts if nobody else strips him. So then who are the mandatories across the board of that? There will be a mandatory that will follow Tim up in the WBO. I'm not sure who that'll be. That'll be their decision. But right now, Murtzalayev is sitting there for the IBF. Brian Mendoza is the interim champ for the WBC. WBA, don't know. So there will be opportunities there, but they're not at the same level as a Charlo. That's clear, and that's obvious. But that doesn't mean that they're not fights that can't be made for us.
Yeah, well, I know Tim and Errol Spence have obviously got a little bit of little bit of history there, a little bit of back and fro. But I mean, that was probably my solution. One thing I did say to Tazzy the other day that I'm really impressed about with you and your team is that there's no waiting around, feeling sorry for yourselves. It's like, okay, that's out. Now we have to refocus and go for the next biggest fight. And that's why I probably threw up especially Errol Spence wins. I think that would be a fight that Tim would probably look at. But is someone like, I've just got here, Big J is entered the conversation. What's he say? Tim has been screwed worse than Bret Hart did by Vince McMahon. Yes, that was a screw job there, Big J. But is Brian Castano an option?
I don't think Brian's even anywhere in the rankings at the moment. He's literally gone quiet. He has a little bit to say from time to time. I'm not sure about Brian, but I think we would have to be looking at those guys that are up there, that in the top of the rankings for Tim, because it's got to be meaningful. It's got to be enough to excite Tim, to motivate Tim to get up and take care of business, and we know he'll do that. But I don't think we rule anybody out, to be honest. Castano's got a great reputation. He's had some great fights, but again, mate, I think it really is going to swing on what happens with the WBO as to whether or not Tim becomes a full champion, or whether or not Tim is still just an interim who's sitting and waiting. And they're two completely different roads that we'll go down. And both of them have options. Obviously, for us, if Tim's a full champion, that opens a few more doors. If not, we then look at the second option run. But I will say, as you just mentioned, Tim's going into camp today, and we are anticipating and pushing for his next fight around a similar date that we had planned for Charlo, which will be October. So we're not mucking around, mate. We've just got to make some stuff happen. Now, whilst it might not be the be-all and end-all, that's not relevant now. More important mentally for Tim that we keep him busy and do what we do. And where they end up, Australia, USA, who knows? Maybe the Aussies will get to see Tim a couple more times. We don't know.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question. Is that I know you and I'm sure Tim will still want to fight around that time because that's his schedule. But I've got one here from Team Batman Boxing. I know he watches all the interviews, especially on D Style all the time. He likes the Tim Tszyu Liam Smith fight. Can we get a UK fight maybe?
Liam Smith's been brought up into the mix too, mate. So Matt and I had a long chat about Liam Smith. He's fighting, doing a rematch with Eubank. So we floated already to the UK that how about we take the winner of that and we'll come over there. We're not leaving really any stone unturned. There'll be plenty of offers that go out there because, as you well know, not everybody's ready, and certainly not everybody's ready to jump in the ring with Tim. So it might be a dozen offers, it could be 20 offers, and we might get one or two responses of actual legitimate opportunities. But it's going to be an interesting week or two, mate, for sure. And I can't crystal ball anything. What I can say is, as Tim's manager, is that we will not be dictated to by anyone in boxing as to what we do. They can make their decisions and they can live with their decisions and they can do whatever they like. But in terms of proceeding forward at 100 miles an hour for us, we won't stop. We've got good forward momentum. We've got great support with Australia and New Zealand and so many people backing us. So we don't intend letting them down just because others have chosen to avoid us, whether it be financial or any other reason. Tim's only 28. We've got plenty of time.
Yeah, no, exactly. Well, I've got a question here from Jay Brown. I know you've sort of touched on a bit. So Charlo vacate, is it more likely Tim's next few fights will be in Australia? So Tim's made no secret that he wants to get over in the States. So would it be possible for maybe his next one or two fights to still be here?
Yeah, it could well be, mate. And that will ultimately come down to no limits and what we can do promotional. You've got to consider too, Charlo, when you get to the levels of the Charlos and the likes, they're always going to be USA-based fights because they are big pay-per-view fights in the United States. When you drop back down and look at our division right now for Tim to take on any of those other names, in the United States, that would probably be a financial disaster. So that makes no sense. So it would make far more sense to bring a number one or another mandatory from the 154s back to Australia, much like Harrison and Ocampo, and do the fight here. Because you've still got to raise revenue, you've still got to pay the fighters, you've still got to go through the commercial realities of boxing. It's not a free reign. All of these shows cost a lot of money. So that's open for negotiation. We're pretty much in a position where we can go anywhere we like. We can work with any promotional company around the world because we're not tied to anybody. We have that luxury of being able to put Tim out there to say, hey, if somebody wants Tim Tszyu to fight Liam Smith, come on out, let's talk. Who knows? We could end up in Dubai. We could end up in Saudi. We could end up anywhere. But there's a real chance with No Limit that it makes commercial sense to come home. I know the Australian fans would love to see Tim go around again, and I always just fall back on the fact that at just turning 28, we've got plenty of time for the American market. But it's got to make commercial sense to go over there. It's pointless going over there fighting in front of 1,000 people and no pay-per-view. That doesn't make sense.
Nah, exactly. Yeah. I've just got a lot of fans out there, I will say, Glenn. There's a lot of comments coming through there, especially overseas, especially Minnesota Mick there. Yep, he was with Costa Mick. He's managed the whole family. I had another question there. I know you've touched on it before, but is there, if there's nothing at 154, could maybe Tim have a fight at 160 and maybe come back?
Look, nothing's off the table, mate. It wasn't on our roadmap. It's certainly not in our immediate plans for Tim to go to 160 because we've got unfinished business at 154. And right now we're focusing on 154, and I think that's the smart way to do it. But should it become a dead ball where we just can't get anything to happen, then absolutely everything's on the table. And when you've got great support and great promoters, and when we've got like Matty Rose and George Rose and Trenny from No Limits backing us all the way, it's a nice position to be in. But we're just realists about the whole thing, mate. And 30 years ago with Kostya, these same deals were happening, mate. These silent ghost deals in the background that just appear out of the blue, and everybody looks at each other and says, "Wasn't that our fight?" And then it's gone. So not a lot's changed. I don't expect it ever will change because money has that capability of, like I said before, changing everyone's opinion, and sometimes to the point of breaking a contract because it's financially worthwhile to break it. Not necessarily the ethical thing, but that's boxing.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I was just going to ask you about that too, because I did see a comment the other day. Again, talking to D-Style about it with the big fights. It's hard to keep fighters like Tim active who want to be active because it's so hard to make these big fights. Go back to what you just mentioned, Costa, 30 years ago. Were the big fights easier to make then? They seemed a lot easier because Costa pretty much fought everyone, maybe bar an Oscar De La Hoya. But the big fights seem to get made. And these days, they just seem so tedious. And I know the money's a lot more than what it used to be, but geez, it must be frustrating as a manager.
It always will be. I mean, the fundamental difference in Kostya's day, there was no social media. So when a fight turned up, people didn't expect Kostya to be fighting every 3 or 4 months. And when it did turn up, the deal was done. It had come out on TV. It had come out on pub posters, and you'd go and watch it, and then you'd wait another 6 months. So 2 fights a year was expected. Today, when in the modern era, when you have the opportunity to fight more than that, as we'd like to do with Tim, you're still up against the same problems. You're still up against dealing with other promotional companies who have their own agenda and their own schedule, and you're trying to squeeze a fight into their schedule that really is not on their mind. They're now starting to pay attention to Tim Tszyu. And ever since Tony Harrison and Ocampo, we're now getting more opportunities to open those doors and negotiate. But take this, for example, Jermell Charlo, this has been going on for over a year for us. Jermell Charlo, I think, has just clocked over 2 years since his last fight. Imagine how the middleweight division must feel and the mandatories in the middleweight for the WBC belt. Where are these guys? Why aren't they jumping on the soapbox? Why aren't they banging the drum? Who knows? Is the step-aside money reached a point for those guys where it's financially a career to just keep stepping aside and leave them alone? These are boxing problems that have to be addressed at some time. But if you were to ask me, is it any different? I don't really think it is all that different from 30 years ago. The money's a lot more, which creates a lot more desire to potentially break contracts. But we've seen contracts being broken on the day of the fight outside the dressing room where fighters were forced to sign a new contract for less money or they weren't going into the ring. So it's never going to be 100% clean. I think there's a lot more activity, but that doesn't necessarily mean in terms of the management role of getting the fight that it's any easier or any harder. It's just that there's 4 belts now, Lyndon, and there's a Ring Magazine belt. And when you've got 4 belts, 4 associations, and they've all got mandatories, god damn, the poor old champions, how do they fight? How do they fight for? You can't fight 4 mandatories a year because there's a non-mandatory clause in those as well. So if for them to satisfy their belts over 1 year, that's 8 fights, mate. That's never going to happen.
Nah, and for all the people out there that always jump up and down and scratch their head about why the big fights don't get made, well, there's a little bit of an insight to it. Just one more on the possibilities for Tim, mate. Jules has got here. Is there a possibility of maybe Russia at some stage?
You can't go to Russia, and we can't
Oh,
fight in Russia.
of course.
So they've still got sanctions on, and the poor old Russian fighters are, regardless of what their thoughts are on what's happening in the world with wars and stuff, which we don't even get involved in. Russia is off limits, so that's out.
Yeah.
But look, there will be in the next week offers that will come to us. Where they say we'll take Tim Tszyu. We don't know who they'll be. We hope there are some. I think Tim's performance against Ocampo might see an end to some of those offers. It's a different Tim Tszyu today, but look, who knows? I don't have a crystal ball, mate. All I know is that as a group, we've already moved on to a degree because it's impossible to fight that contest, Charlo and Canelo. We can't undo that.
Yeah.
But what we can do is make sure we get the very best out of a pretty shitty set of circumstances for Tim, and that's the best a team and management can do. So I'm happy to keep everyone posted as soon as I get some good information, but it's going to take some time to work through this mess, and we're resetting and starting from scratch, mate, and just hope we can get Timmy into the ring quickly and keep him active and keep him mentally as sharp as he was for Harrison and Ocampo.
Will you go over for the Canelo Charlo fight, Glenn, and with Tim, or?
I don't know, mate. We had a chat. Matt and I had a chat about that. Tim and I were scheduled to go for Spence Crawford, and we may still do that because, as you know, Errol Spence and Tim have a little bit of a back and forth going. And Tim has said to Errol, if you win and you own the lot, then come on up and let's talk. But that was based on the fact that by the time he got up there, Tim would also be undisputed. So I would think that Errol Spence, being in the Charlo camp, is not going to be too interested in fighting Jermell. But who's left for Errol Spence to go up to now at 154 if he doesn't take Tim? There's nothing, and that makes it even more unattractive. So you never know, mate. We might get Errol Spence if he comes up. It might be the only convincing fight at 154, and absolutely we would take that fight with both hands.
It would be a massive fight. And look, what better way if Spence does beat Crawford to be ringside and start the little back and forth? It'd be perfect. So
a little point of the finger, Lyndon, from the front row saying.
Oh, I think so. Yeah, don't storm the ring and make a spectacle. I'm sure we won't, but it's something. But
one thing about Aussies, mate, and you know this, is that you can remain professional, you can remain. Have humility, but you can still deliver a savage blow without being a dickhead.
A tool, yeah.
So we'll get there, mate. No doubt. Don't have any doubts for all your fans that we'll get there, and Tim will get those belts. It may mean that we take a little bit longer and we've got to do one at a time, but I have no doubt that there's nobody in the 154s, including Charlo, that we were worried about. So if Charlo doesn't come back, so be it. Move on. It'll be a forgotten name for us, and Tim will make his mark, and we'll get those belts, and then most likely move up to middleweight and take care of that division as well.
All right, I've got just a couple more for you here, Big J. Now, please ask him, what does he think of the name change from the Soul Taker to the Werewolf? I was sort of more thinking the Pitbull or something like that. What do you reckon?
Oh, well, that's another fight we're negotiating now with the owner of the Pitbull for round 2. So. I don't know, mate. We never gave Tim the Soul Taker nickname. That just sort of came from somewhere and stuck. So we're not really big on nicknames. Neither of the boys are overly keen on them.
Yeah.
but they go with it. It's part and parcel of the enjoyment. But there'll be no name changes. We'll just get down to business, mate, and get back to business and what we do best, and that's winning.
All right, just I guess I said another couple for you, but one thing has been a lot of comments in there, and I'm sure you've been waiting for the question, and I know you probably don't want to answer it, and you're sick of talking about it.
Oh, here it comes.
I'm going to ask it because we ask the hard questions here. Michael's a rapper. He's been at it again. He's out there having his say. I know you probably don't want to talk about it. You're sick of it, but I've got to ask the hard questions.
Go on, go ahead and ask it.
Well, is there a possibility that we could see that fight?
No.
No. Okay. Short answer?
Oh, that time's come and gone, mate. I mean, you have to eventually be realistic about your career and your future path and where Tim wants to be in boxing, and that path, that opportunity is long past. And whilst some people will say it's the fight everybody wants to see and the fight
world
all
apparently
Australians want to see, there's equally as many who don't want it. And just from our side, mate, it does nothing. There's no motivation there for Tim to take that fight, and that opportunity was given, and it never happened. And we wish, good luck to Michael with what he does. If Michael becomes a champion at middleweight, we'll happily accommodate him at middleweight when we get there, but on our schedule, and then we'd take that belt and bring that one home as well.
All right, one last question, mate, before we let you go. I just want a little bit of an update on the rest of the team. Obviously, Nikita and now Liam Wilson. Anything you can let us know about?
Yeah, all good. Nikita back in the ring very soon, middle of August. Liam most likely on the same card. And I can break another little bit of news for you as well, mate, as a exclusive for you.
Nice.
Is that young Vegas Larfield has come over to join up with me on Fight Life as well. So
awesome.
So those four boys for me represent what Australian boxing is all about: the dedication and the focus, and they're the boys that I see as. And there's so many good boys in Australian boxing, and I've had so many chats and opportunities to have a look at a lot of boys. But at the end of the day, mate, I stick with what I say. It's not a volume game. It's when you make a commitment, it can be 10 or 15 years, and you've got to give it 100%. And these are the boys that I can work with, get them to their world title dreams and goals, and bring Australian boxing along with it. So he's only a young fella. He's only 21, and he's a terrific young kid. And I've watched him mature, and he's coming along beautifully. 9-0 and 8 knockouts. He's coming along lovely, and I look forward to working with him and Liam. And you're going to see both of those boys working with no limits. So we're going to see them on TV plenty of times, and it's nice to have four very, very good boys, but also very, very good humans and very good role models for the sport for me to represent.
Seems to be a prerequisite, doesn't it?
I think it does, mate. I really do. I think for too long, boxing management has been treated without the diligence and the respect that it needs. You've got to give it back. It's about the athlete first and foremost. If the manager does a good job, there should be not a lot said. The rewards come with the results of the fighters, and then and of course for me, I've always said it's about health, welfare, and future. And so these guys are just so excited to come on board and be part of the Team Tszyu group and part of Fight Life Management and part of No Limits. They're set now, and they will have great exposure. And Australian boxing, they've already got great fans, great followers, and I hope I can take them to the highest level, because then I will have achieved my goal, and so would they. And it can only be good for Australian boxing. We've got such an amazing group of young fighters coming through right now that's never been healthier. And if we can keep leading the way on platforms and getting these other fellas opportunities, then it can only be good for everybody.
I didn't actually mention Shannon O'Connell, Glenn. I'm assuming that Shannon's just sort of still taking things pretty slow. Yeah,
mate. Look, as you know, Shan's been through the griller, and on the back of the UK fight with a complete composite shoulder replacement, she's technically been medically retired. And so we've had that long chat, and it's taken a long time because she is such a devoted person to her sport. but we've got it to a point now where I think you'll find in the not too distant future that she'll make an announcement about that, and we'll do that in a real special way where we get to celebrate the 20 years, because I don't think we'll see another female fighter do another 20-year stint as she has.
Yep.
She's the toughest I've ever met and probably ever will, and deserves to go out on a nice
And stubborn.
high note. So I'd like to be able to send her out, with some accolades and give her the opportunity to thank everybody and go out on a high note, which I think she's very, very deserving of.
Yeah, no, 100%, mate. And I was just going to say before, when you're talking about the management company, I still remember the conversation we had probably a couple of years ago. I think you only had Tim at the time, and you never thought you'd be back doing this, and here you are with your own management company with a stable of fighters. So, mate, I think it's a service to boxing that you've done that we're all very appreciative of.
Thank you, mate. I appreciate that, and it's exciting. It's wonderful. As you know, I love my involvement with the boys and the Tszyu family, and I still do work for Kostya, even though he's in Russia.
Is that right?
We still do some deals, and he talks to me about some commercial stuff, and we'll always have that relationship. And having the boys and watch the boys grow up, and now getting the opportunity to do it again with them is absolutely mind-boggling for me. But not to just to be totally fixed. Like the Tszyu boys, well and truly established, and it's great to be able to take on a couple of other young fellas now and let them ride on that group as well and bring them along and use those doors that they've opened. And Tim and Nikita are both equally as excited about the other young fellas joining us, because they know that they, through their dad, had doors opened and opportunities and legacy that we'll always be grateful for. So I'm just excited that Liam and Vegas get to now experience that as well. And of course, working with No Limits and having that platforms to put them on is fantastic. And I can only see in the next few years, with all these boys coming through, we're going to see a lot of Australian champions in the next few years, and that excites me no end.
I'm sure it does, mate. Well, mate, I really appreciate you giving up your a portion of your Monday night for us, mate. It's very much appreciated. I'm sure everyone up there in the comments, especially my wife here, she's a massive fan of the Butcher, Nikita. She's with all due respect to Tim, Nikita is her favourite Aussie fighter. She loves the way he rolls, and he's a bit left to centre, isn't he, old Nikita?
Oh, look, you couldn't ask for two different personalities, and Nikita's just the funniest, quirkiest. He is an absolute cracker of an individual, and it took us a little while to find out just who Nikita was. And now that we have, you might have seen, we're moving him in a little bit of a different direction now. He came out to YMCA, quirky stuff. Mate, you wouldn't believe the fan base explosion on the back of that. He jumped, I think, 6,000 or 7,000 followers after that fight. So again, they're two totally different people, but they have this same deadly focus and intent that is very rare. But I get the beauty of having to, I get to play both sides. I've got Tim and I've got Nikita, and just very fortunate and very blessed that I have such great young fellas that I'm looking after, and I intend to give them every opportunity, and 100%. And it's very humbling, mate, when you think about, wasn't that long ago, Lyndon, we were in Bendigo with you on your card.
Yeah.
And Tim was just establishing himself in the regionals, and now we're at the cusp of the world stage, and I expect that all four of the boys now have that opportunity, and it's just an amazing time. And I wish every Australian fighter the very best, and I hope they all have equal success, regardless of which
very
path
well
they
said, mate.
Yeah.
And there you go, Jules. Much appreciated. Glenn, amazing to hear from you so soon after the bad news broke. So, mate, we really appreciate. I did actually think about giving you a message over the weekend, but I thought you had a lot more on your plate than coming on tonight. So I really appreciate you coming on and obviously answering some questions for all our viewers out there.
Yeah, it's a pleasure, mate. As I said, anytime you need, just give me a call. I'm always happy to talk with you. You're one of the good guys in our sport, and happy to support your little your talking boxing, which seems to be getting bigger and bigger all the time.
We're just a little channel, and we're just a little community that love talking amongst ourselves, mate. But it's always great to have people like yourself on. I know you're a busy man, and you're in demand at the moment. So, mate, really appreciate you coming on, and I can't wait to hear what's next, because when it is announced, we can't wait to get you back on.
Yes, we'll keep in touch, mate, and thanks again for the opportunity for a chat.
Thanks very much, Glenn. Talk soon, mate.
Cheers, mate. Bye bye.
All right, Glen Jennings. How good was that, eh? Yeah, just massive. And Glenn actually contacted me today to come on. That's the sort of guy that Glenn is. As I said, I did contemplate maybe messaging him to maybe come on or do a standalone interview, and I knew that he had a lot on his plate. So for him to actually contact me today and offer to come on was very, very much appreciated, as I said. And what a team! Very difficult not to like the whole Team Tszyu thing, isn't it? And obviously Glenn's company as well. So again, thank you to Glenn, and I'm sorry if I didn't get to everyone's questions there. There's a lot coming through. Sort of just picking out that the ones I could sort of see there. What do you got there? Next time for Nikita, get him to come out to Shawn Michaels. I love that too. What else have we got there? Yeah, so cheers, Glenn. So, all right, guys, well, that's it for the team or the Team Tszyu situation. I hope you got something out of that. Again, as I said, apologies if I didn't get to all your questions, but how good a guy is Glenn to come on and to have a chat. There's obviously some other things going on. Now, I can't remember who actually brought it up last week. Actually, is there anything else you guys want to talk about? Bring it up, because there was a little bit going on the weekend. Not many big fights, of course, but if there's anything you want to have a chat about now, just let me know. Jules, what do you got there, mate? Shout out to you, Lynn. Oh, thanks, mate. Nice work pulling the strings. Wasn't expected to be chatting with GJ on Monday night. Well, I didn't either, Jules. And I don't know, I might be wrong, but I haven't really seen him do any other media so far. I haven't really checked the other sites in the last day or so, but yeah, it's the first time obviously I've seen or heard and had a chance to talk to him about what's next for Tim and how forth. Right, was he? I really like the Michael Zarafa comeback. Just a simple no, we're not interested. And that's not running from Michael. It's just a business decision to say, Glenn, from Glenn to say, look, you had your chance, you blew it. We're going in a different direction. And it's really classy too that he did say to Michael Zarafa, hey, all the best. And that's what I love about Glenn and the team. There's none of this trash talking and all the rest of the bullshit that goes on out there. It's pretty much be humble, be respectful, and you'll get the fan respect by being that way. So that's why they're number one and probably the most popular fighter in Australia since his dad, Costa. So what do we got there? Oh, mate, Big J, did you get a chance to the top 10? Yes, I have got the top 10 list of Big J. Now, I hope I've got it right. That's all I'm going to say. It's the top 10 best Aussie performances of all time. Now, I know I've got hiding to nothing here. I'm going to upset a lot of you guys who think I'm on drugs and don't know what I'm talking about, but I'm going to give you my top 10 shortly. We'll see what else you guys want to talk about in the meantime, though. What do we got? Paul says, that was great. Well done, get him on. Thank you, Paul. As I said, he offered his time, which he always does. And, yeah, it was a great event. Just retirement. Thank you, Big J. Thank you very much for bringing that up. That's definitely on my agenda to talk about tonight before we get into the top 10 Aussie performances of all time. I hope I haven't mucked that up. What do you got there, Mick? Sorry, mate. Didn't ask my questions. What did you ask that I missed? I was sort of scrolling through them. I think I did see one about Michael Zarafa. Oh, hang on. I did see something about Noonan Boy. Yes, I spoke to Noonan Boy on Saturday night, Mick. Now, he's got a little bit going on at the moment. He's on the golf course a fair bit these days, but no, he's been absolutely flat out with Tim's last fight, of course, was only, a couple of weeks ago. He's obviously about to jet off to the States for George Kambosos' fight. He's just busy, mate, that's all. He's got a lot going on, and so I did talk to him about maybe coming on soon. Maybe might get him on before he leaves, although I think it might be next Sunday, so maybe not. Either way, Mick, I will catch, I promise you, in one way or another, over the next couple of weeks, I will have Mick on in some form or another, whether in person or on a stream or whatever it might be. So apologies if I didn't ask you questions, mate. There's a few I didn't get to. All right, so Jeff Horn, I want to give a big shout out to Jeff Horn. And I feel a little bit sorry for Jeff because it got sort of mixed up in the whole Tim Tszyu situation over the weekend. Of course, that's not Tim's fault. It's just the way it happened. But I want to really put a tribute out to Jeff Horn, one of the Aussie great fighters, great performances, and you will see that soon on my list. But I just, again, want to send all my respect and well wishes to Jeff. He's been an absolute warrior for Australian boxing. Who can forget that fight with Manny Pacquiao? What was it, 6 years ago? I think it was yesterday. I'll never forget it. I was there. I'll talk a little bit more about it as we go through the top 10. But this is a true Australian legend. Beat one of the greatest fighters of all time, pound for pound. And I don't think another Australian can make that claim. I'm just going to put that out there, to have someone that I would think would be in the top 10 pound for pound fighters of all time, not just the last couple of decades, of all time, the top 10. And whether you think he won or not, let's not go into that. I, for one, think he won the fight, and I get really pissed off when I see people commenting he didn't win and Manny Pacquiao was ripped off. He wasn't ripped off. I'll say it again. It was a very, very, very close fight. It could have went either way. It just so happened to go Jeff's way. So these people that say that Manny was ripped off and robbed, you're kidding yourselves. It was a close fight that went Jeff Horn's way. The Tim Bradley fight was a rip-off, I will say, but this fight was not a rip-off. Jeff earned the win, and as I said, I'll forever remember being there for that fight in Brisbane. I did see they said it was a cool winter's day in Brisbane. It certainly wasn't cool because I got sunburnt. Now I know I'm from Victoria. I know we're a little bit gentle down here, a bit tender. But yeah, I got sunburnt that day. So that was mid-July. It would have been 3 degrees here in Victoria, but I got sunburnt up in Brisbane. But I won't forget it. I still remember it was my birthday around that time, and Jeff actually sent me a birthday message to say happy birthday, if you can believe that, the week of his fight with Manny Pacquiao. That's the sort of guy that he is. I remember him in Las Vegas. I went to see him fight Terence Crawford at the MGM Grand. Saw him in the food court of all places, watching his wife have a pizza in the MGM food court, if you can believe that. And made all the time for us to have a chat. He welcomed us into the gym for his last workout in Vegas. It was at Kevin Barry's gym over there. And he welcomed us in, got photos and all the rest of it. Just a legend of a guy. And as I said, that fight with Manny Pacquiao, regardless of what you thought of the result, is... I won't reveal my cards at the moment about where he sits as far as performances go, but that fight with Manny Pacquiao, I'll never forget it, being at ringside, the atmosphere, the heart that Jeff showed during that fight. And I will say too, I'm really, really glad that he's retired, because I've got no doubt that his heart wasn't in it. You could just tell that by the Tim Tszyu fight. I don't think he could have beaten Tim, if I'm going to be honest, if he was at his absolute peak. Although it would have been interesting to see the Jeff Horn that fought Manny Pacquiao up against Tim Tszyu. Would have been a little bit more interesting. But at the time, Tim pretty much ripped him to pieces. He was shot, I think, physically and mentally. I was fortunate enough to promote or co-promote one of Jeff's fights. It was in Bendigo back in 2019 when he got beaten by Michael Zarafa. Definitely one of the highlights of my 40-odd years that I've been involved in boxing, to be involved in a show like that. And I'll be forever grateful to Dean Lonigan, who made me or brought me on board as his co-promoter for that event. And as I said, one of the highlights. And, I fought, for 15 years or whatever it was, and fought all over the world and whatever else. But that was one of the highlights of my boxing involvement, was to be included in that. And even though he lost that fight, and credit to Michael Zarafa that night, he was sensational. But he fought him 3 months later, and that fight in Brisbane, if you weren't there, you would have seen it on TV. I was there in the building. Again, one of the gutsiest fights I've ever seen. He was gone. Michael had him done like a dinner in round 9. I know there was controversy that he was given a reprieve with the cut, because Michael had him, on the verge of being stopped. He regrouped. The right hand from the gods. He decked Michael Zarafa, pulled out the decision, and one of the gutsiest performances that I've ever seen from an Australian boxer. Now, I haven't actually included Aussies versus Aussies, I will say. Big J, if you're the one that had asked me to do the list, I haven't got Aussies versus Aussies. I've made a bit of an asterisk beside that. And I haven't got Costa Tszyu in it, because, again, I'll stand by my reasoning with all our lists. I see him as a Russian fighter that was just based in Australia for his career and then went home. So I'm putting that out there. Costa Tszyu is not on my list, even though the fight was subdued. It could have been in the top 2 or 3. So I'm putting that out there. So your tip there, Big J. Jeff, our best win ever. Tim trumps Jeff again. Yeah, it's a little bit unfortunate, as I said there, mate, that it did happen to come out. That I didn't see a lot of it, Big J, and I'm really pissed that I haven't. It's been all over about the Tim thing all weekend and other stuff going on. I didn't have a chance to really look into it, and I just hope all you guys out there will really, especially the ones that haven't been around in the fight game for a long time, will truly appreciate that fight of Jeff beating Manny Pacquiao. As I said, Manny Pacquiao in the top 10 fighters of all time, regardless of era, and Jeff Horn beat him. So, and no other Aussie can say that. So, yeah, that's my opinion on Jeff Horn. I can't give enough gratitude and respect to Jeff Horn, a guy that only took up boxing in 2007, if you will. Went to the Olympics, turned pro. He'd been bullied all his life. Took up boxing to help him against bullies. As I said, went to the Olympics, turned pro, and I will say too. Again, we'll touch on a little bit on my list, but again, full respect to not just Dean Lonigan, but is it David Higgins and Duco? They took a fighter that was completely unknown, had absolutely no right to be in the ring with Manny Pacquiao, have an opportunity to fight Manny Pacquiao, and Duco and Dean Lonigan and David Higgins, which ran Duco at the time, made that fight happen. They got, was it 10 million out of the Queensland government, put the fight on, had enough money to bring Manny Pacquiao to Australia. So full respect to them as well. And then Jeff had to pull it off. So I could go on all night about Jeff Horn. I've got so much respect for him, but I know he probably doesn't watch the show. But if you do watch it, Jeff, all the best in retirement. I wish you all the very best, and from all Australian fighters, managers, trainers, promoters, fans, yeah, all the very best for what comes next to Jeff Horn and your family. Big J, no, Michael versus Ellis, our best all Aussie. Now, Big J, are you changing the rules? Are you saying the best Aussie fights of all time or the best Aussie performance of all time? I might have to rejig my list here. I thought it was the best performances by an Aussie of all time, not the best actual fight, because that would have been in there. So I'm sorry, I'm going to have to do that another time, because my list is the top 10 performances by an Aussie of all time. So you're going to have to put that one on the back burner. I'm sorry, mate. I had another comment there. Where did I see that? Liam will be on the next No Limit card in August. Yes, he will. Thanks, Batman. Happy retirement to Jeff. Yes, for sure, mate. And Jules, thanks, mate. Shout out to Jeff as well. I might have to copy or tag him, whatever the hell you do these days, so we can have a look at this video. All right, let's get into the list. Now, as I said, Big J, I'm sorry. I did ask you to clarify. You haven't, so you're going to have to put up with my list. Excuse me. Have a quick drink before I get into this. This is the top 10 Aussie performances, or performances by an Aussie of all time. Now, as I said, some provisions in there, asterisks. I'll get to some honourable mentions in a sec as well. I have excluded Tszyu. I'll say that again. He's a Russian fighter, born in Russia, had all his amateur career in Russia, came to Australia for his pro career, and then went home after his career was over. So I've put a line through him, so I'm sorry. I've got a Johnny Famechon one in there. A little bit different. Johnny Famechon, I know he was born in France, but he was raised and had his whole career in Australia. So a little bit different. Hang on, Big J. You clarifying? No, the best world champion fights won by an Aussie was the list. Okay, then we're on the same page. The best world champion fights won by an Aussie. Although that could be Aussie versus Aussie. All right, well, I'll put a line through Aussie versus Aussie. I will give an honourable mention that the Barry Michael Lester Ellis fight, if you're talking about actual physical fights involving an Aussie, will definitely be in the top 2 or 3. But sorry, you didn't clarify that, so that's an honourable mention. The other honourable mention I'll put in there was a losing fight by Troy Waters in 1993 against Terry Norris. Went over to the States. Terry Norris was an absolute beast at the time. He was coming off wins over Sugar Ray Leonard, Maurice Blocker, Simon Brown, you name it, John McGubby. He'd beaten them all, knocked them all. I hadn't knocked out Sugar Ray Leonard, but put a beating on all these guys. Was probably in the top 2 or 3 pound for pound at that stage. Troy Waters went over there, decked Terry Norris in the fight. Unfortunately, that didn't go down well with Terry Norris, who got up and absolutely went to town on Troy Waters, and Troy was stopped in his corner after the third round with cuts. But what a performance by him. And also his fight against Gianfranco Rossi, I thought was a really good effort as well. The other honourable mention is not a professional. I'm talking about Graham Spike Sheeny at the 1988 Olympics, won the Olympic silver medal. That is definitely worthy of an Aussie performance. I know it wasn't a world title, Big J, but you can't have some of the best Aussie performances of all time and not include Spike Sheeny at the 88 Olympics. Come from nowhere, got to the final and lost to the Russian in the final. Did beat him. I think it was a few months after the Olympics. I don't know if any of you guys out there remember it. They actually did a fight night of amateurs. It was like almost like a pro night, but it was all amateurs, and it was all the best Aussies versus Aussies, headlined by Spike Sheeny against the Russian in the main event, if you can call that for an amateur show, and Spike Sheeny got the win. So for me, the Olympic Games as a whole was eligible for this list, I think, Big J. All right, so to clarify, the best performances by an Aussie in a World Championship fight. Now, again, just my opinion, these are the fights that meant a lot to me. I think they were great, not just action fights, but the best performance by an Aussie. A couple of these are going to surprise you. Put in the comments there. I know I've probably forgotten a couple, guys, but put in the comments there after I've gone through it all if you've got a fight that should be in there. Okay, all right, so let's get into it. Let's start at number 10. This is one that will definitely surprise some of you. It is featuring Jeff Fenech. It is actually his fight against Victor Kalijes back on March 7th, 1988. Okay, it was for the WBC featherweight title. Jeff had won the 2 world titles at bantamweight and super bantamweight. Victor Kalijes doesn't get spoken about enough. An absolute beast at the time. He was a WBA super bantamweight or junior featherweight, whatever you want to call it. He was a WBA champion, went up to fight Jeff, who was the reigning WBC super bantamweight champion. And this guy was knocking guys out left, right, and centre. He was feared amongst the division. Jeff Fenech took him head on. Not just took him on, took him head on, beat him down for 10 rounds and stopped him in the 10th round to win the vacant WBC featherweight title. As I said, I know it doesn't get a lot of plaudits in world boxing as far as a lot of this stuff goes, but Jeff Fenech, what a performance by beating Victor Kalijes. As I said, beat him down for 10 rounds and won the WBC featherweight title. So that is my number 10 as far as the best performances by an Aussie in a world title fight. So I know we've got about a 30 or 40 second delay here, guys, so I'll wait for the comments to come. If you haven't seen the fight, make sure you check it out, okay? I might even, as we're going, I might see if I can maybe put the links into the... well, I'll see how we go. Anyway, I'm going to put the link of this particular one in there because I want you to see it if you haven't seen it in the past, all right? So might not be able to get all these fights up. I'll just turn my volume down there. Sorry, guys, I'm going a little bit off course here. But I'm going to put this in there in case you haven't seen it. There it is there. That is Jeff Fenech. Probably not the best copy there, but anyway, you'll see what I'm talking about there. So that's Jeff Fenech. And did that come up there? Yeah, it did. Victor Kalijes. Check it out. All right, what do you got there, Jules? I hope... can't wait to see Joe Batight on the list. I'm sorry, Jules. You're going to be a little bit disappointed there. But, mate, as I said, it's just my opinion. Just my opinion. He's on the list, so I will say. All right, number 9. I have Daniel Geale with a 12-round decision over Felix Sturm in September the 1st, 2012. Sturm, of course, had fights against all the best in the business. Daniel Geale went to Germany, put on an absolute clinic, beat Felix Sturm in a 12-round decision. I'll just actually bring up what I think it was for the WBA and IBF from memory. Let's have a look. All right, so where is it? It was back, where was it? 2012. So it was for the IBF and WBA middleweight titles. It was in Germany. And, 12-round decision over Felix Sturm. So that's my number 9 best performance by an Aussie. Underrated fighter is Daniel Geale. Again, doesn't get the plaudits a lot of his successors do, or predecessors or successors in the Aussie fight game. probably because he's a very, very low-key type of fighter. But that performance against Felix Sturm was unbelievable, and that is my number 9. Number 8, I have Jimmy Carruthers, KO1 Vic Tszyu. So this took place on November 15th, 1952. And that was when Jimmy Carruthers won the world bantamweight title with the first round knockout of Vic Tszyu. I'll just bring up his record there. I think I've got it right. Yeah, it was bantam. I just want to see it was WBA, WBC, or whether it was actually unified back then. Where was it? So he actually stopped him in the rematch later that year in the 10th round. But it's just for the world bantamweight title. It was in Johannesburg, South Africa. So I think that's what makes it even better. He's gone over to South Africa, and you will see, just preempting you, Jules, there, fighting overseas can sometimes trump winning at home, although that sort of contradicts my number 1. But anyway, so I've got Jimmy Carruthers, KO1, Vic Tszyu, for the world bantamweight title in November 1952 in South Africa. So unbelievable performance from Jimmy Carruthers. Number 7. You're not going to be happy, Jules, because I have number 7, Jai Apataya, with the 12-round decision over Marius Breidis. And it took place July 2nd, 2022, so the anniversary was only yesterday. Look, unbelievable performance, Jules. He totally outboxed Breidis, which was obviously the first great part of it, but also doing it with the broken jaw was an unbelievable effort. But I just had to bring it back a couple because it was done at home in front of his home crowd. You'll get what I'm talking about as I go through the list anyway. But Jai Patai, number 7, with the 12-round decision over Marius Breidis. And that, as I said, that happened yesterday. Anniversary was July 2nd, 2022. I'll get to your list in a second, mate. Right at the end, Big J, when I go through them. So that's number 7. Number 6, I have Johnny Famechon, win 15 over Jose Legra. Took place on January 21st, 1969 for the world featherweight title. Now, the thing is, what you got to remember with Jose Legra is he was like fighting a Triple G or Canelo or something overseas. And I'll just bring his record up there. Featherweight at that time, he was an absolute monster. So he fought. I'm just gonna. Sorry, guys. I'm gonna bring up what year was that. Sorry, that was in 1969. So he. Where is it? All right. So at the time, where is it there? I'll bring it. Jose Legra. Okay, so he was 105 wins, 5 losses, and 4 draws at that time, and he fought him in England and took the title off him. Now, Jules, I'm not saying anything against Jai. Just make sure you watch this fight and do a bit of research on Jose Legra. Johnny Famechon, as I said, going over to England to fight him, and a guy that was an absolute beast at the time. And he ended up with 129 wins, 11 losses, and 4 draws. So he won world titles after that fight as well. So I know you might not agree with that, mate, as you do there with the eyes there. But as I said, I've got Johnny Famechon with a 15-round decision over Jai and Marius Breidis. Number 5, I have Lionel Rose with a 15-round decision over Fighting Harada. I'm going to bring up his record there. So this took place on February 27th, 1968. Again, it was for the world bantamweight title. I'm just going to bring. Sorry, guys, I've got a light in the road there that I've sort of got to get around. So that, what I say, that was 1968. Fighting Harada. So, and again, took place in Japan. So again, going over there, Fighting Harada was 50 wins and 3 losses at the time. Fighting him in his hometown or home country of Japan would have been. And he would have, I'm not sure, did they even have planes back then? I'm not sure whether he got a ship or something. Who knows? Maybe they had planes in 1968. I'm sure they would have. Yes, they would have had planes. But yeah, to go over there and to beat Fighting Harada, who was the reigning world champion for the WBA, WBC bantamweight titles, was an unbelievable effort. And as I said, the 15-round decision, I've got him at number 5. What do you got there, Big J? Legra over Harada. Legra over Harada for Johnny Famechon. Okay, all right. So you would have had it the other way around. I'm reading that. You would have had Johnny Famishon over Allegra above Lionel Rosenhart. I think they're pretty similar anyway, Big J. I thought you could probably swap them and have either way, but I think either way, number 5 and 6 on the list. All right, number 4. This is where we get into the nitty gritty. All right, these are all sort of modern day fights. I will say. I've got to admit that I didn't actually say it at the start of the show, to be honest. I haven't got Mike Altamura on. I'm not going to go back to 1912 or 15 or 1930. I'm not going to comment on fights, great performances by Aussies that I just don't know anything about. I'm more from the 50s or 60 onwards. So apologies if you're a historian that I didn't have someone from the 50s on. Or actually, I have got someone from the 50s, Jimmy Carrollers. You know what I mean? Number 4, I have George Kambosos with a 12-round decision over Teofimo Lopez for the world lightweight title. It took place on November 27th, 2021. And look, I don't have to really spruik the merits of this win. George Kambosos, heavy underdog, hadn't fought anyone remotely close to a Teofimo Lopez. Lopez was considered one of the top pound-for-pound fighters in the world. Had beaten Vasily Lomachenko for the titles. Vasily Lomachenko was probably in the top 4 or 5 pound-for-pound in the world at the time. Teofimo Lopez took the titles off him, took on George Kambosos, and George Kambosos not just beat him by outboxing him. I think he took his heart and took his soul. Dropped him in the first round, and over the journey just broke him down bit by bit. And I think what was really impressed about this fight from George is he got in Teofimo Lopez's head. And I don't think Lopez had ever seen anything or anyone like George Kambosos, who was in his face, refused to back down, stared him down, and I got no doubt was in his head before that fight took place. Lopez come out, and I think he said he was going to stop George in the first round. It was never going to happen. George dropped him in the first round, and as I said, broke him down during the fight. Got off the canvas in the 10th round, gutted it out, and won a 12-round decision. And in my opinion, the 4th greatest performance by an Aussie in a world championship fight. Jules says, great call, Reed George. Wasn't expecting me so high, but glad he is. I couldn't have it any other way, Jules. Look, and we've had so many great performances over the journey. And I will say, I was surprised at myself that I had Jaya Pataya so far down the list at number 7. That's how many great performances Aussies have had in world title fights over the years. So it's a credit to all the guys above Jai, because you're right, it could have easily been in the top 1 or 2, but number 7 for me. And you're right there, Team Batman. Great win for Kambosos. And look, what you've also got to remember here too, guys, is that, and I've commented on this show a few times about it, the magnitude of this, of the win by George over Teofimo Lopez really hit home when I was in Vegas for the Maloney's trip a couple of months ago with Andy fighting Nakatani in Vegas. I watched George Kambosos either in person or on social media getting absolutely mobbed by American fight fans who aren't necessarily that way, especially towards Australian fighters. The Mexican fans are one thing. I know the American fans, I know that the English love to get around their fighters, but the Americans are very, very loath to get around non-sort of American or Mexican sort of, or Puerto Rican type fighters. I seen him over there. So many people, getting him getting mobbed for autographs and photos and everything else. He's a real player in world boxing over there, and this is the win that made it that way, and that's what has him so high on the list for me. By just seeing his standing in world boxing because of that fight. They don't just hand out respect to anyone over there, and he's got it in spades. So George Kambosos, number 4 for me. Jules again, George's mind games for 6 or 7 months ahead of that fight were a masterclass. Yeah, and look, to be honest with you, Jules, I really wish we had seen the George Kambosos from that fight Devin Haney. I think in that first, I know I'm getting a little bit off topic here. The first fight against Devin Haney, I thought he got a little bit caught up in the whole being undisputed. I thought he went off track of what got him that fight or got him the win in the first place. Thought he was more concerned in talking it up and getting in a bit of exchange with Devin Haney and wearing the flash suits and flashing the bling and all the rest of it. And I think that really took his mind away, that mindset that he had for Lopez. He didn't have it for Haney. I think he was more concerned with hyping the fight, promoting the fight. And I just don't think we saw the George Kambosos that we saw against Lopez against Haney. The rematch was a little bit different. Hats off to George. I think he really got back to the mindset in the second fight. Unfortunately, Devin Haney is a great fighter and got the win regardless. So George Kambosos, number 4 for me, into the top 3. And again, guys, I know a lot of you will have differing opinions. It's just mine. Big J, you're to blame. You asked me to do it. And I'll put your list up at the end, by the way, Big J. I'll go back and bring that up. Number 3 for me is Jeff Harding, with a 12th round Rocky-style 12th round knockout of Dennis Andries. Took place on June 24th, so another anniversary a week or so ago in 1989. I still remember it. I was 15, about to turn 16 at that stage, watching it from home, jumping around the lounge room. A lot of you guys aren't probably old enough, but if you haven't seen it again, look at it. I'm going to put the fight up on here because... Look, I'm assuming as fight fans you've seen it, but I'm going to put it up because it has to be seen to be believed. Where is it? Is that the whole fight there? Yep, I'll ring that up there. And I'm going to put it in there. If you haven't seen it, Mike Tyson at ringside, you can see, or you can't see it, but Jeff Fennick was there. Jeff Fennick was jumping around like a schoolgirl during the fight. Look, you got to see it to believe it. That's all I'm going to say. Way behind on points. Took the fight on short notice. I think he'd only had 14 fights or something at the time. Took the fight against Dennis Andries, who was a big, strong, fearsome man. He'd lost to Thomas Hearns before that, but then won the vacant, or I think it was vacant, or he'd won it anyway, whatever it was. Had the WBC light heavyweight strap. Jeff Harding in Atlantic City, New Jersey, as I said, way behind on points. Come out in the last round, and just it was a Rocky-style performance. That's all I'm going to say. Dropped Dennis Andrews. I think it was 3 times he dropped him in the last round, waved it off. For me, as I said, look, I'm probably living out my childhood memories here, but as I said, I still remember it. 15, about to turn 16, jumping around. Jeff Harding had blood all over his face. He barely won a round for the whole fight and pulled it out in the last round. So do yourself a favour. I've put the link in there, so check it out. Big J, forgot about Harding, greatest comeback of all time. It really was, mate. It really was. And again, if you haven't seen it, check out the link there and watch it because it has to be seen to be believed. This guy just had a head made of concrete. And the funny thing is, not so funny for Jeff, he actually fought Dennis Andries a few months later and got stopped in the 7th round back here in Australia at the Tennis Centre in Melbourne. I was actually at that fight again as a kid. I've been 16 years of age. And he got stopped in the 7th round by Dennis Andries. But like true champions did, he regrouped, got back to another point where he got the title, had a 3rd fight with Dennis Andries, and this time beat him on points. So full credit to Jeff Harding, a true legend of Australian boxing. And again, another one that probably doesn't get the respect and the plaudits that others have. But that fight there, for me, as it says there, is the 3rd best performance by an Aussie in a world title fight. All right, so down to the number 2 there, guys. Again, just my opinion. I have Jeff Fennick with the draw over Azuma Nelson, June 28th, 1991. Another fight that we're having the anniversary of a week ago. Now, I know it's not technically a win for Jeff Fennick, but for me, for all my heart, that was a win for Jeff Fennick. The best, or second best performance by an Aussie boxer at that time, and I'll give you the reasons why. Not just the performance of Jeff, because it was a great, the tactics and everything else that he brought into the fight. Azuma Nelson, again, was probably in the top 2 or 3 pound-for-pound fighters in the world at that stage. He'd won multiple titles. This was for the WBC super featherweight title. He'd won titles at featherweight and now super featherweight. And he was a very, very feared fighter. His only loss had been against Salvador Sanchez, the late, great Salvador Sanchez, in very, very early in his career. He lasted to the 15th round. He was an absolute superstar. This was on the Mike Tyson, Razor Ruddock undercard. Can't believe it was actually an undercard fight, but it was. And the performance of Jeff Fennick to systematically break down a fighter of Azuma Nelson's stature and his resume was something, again, had to be seen to be believed. This is not just Jeff Harding. I've got Jeff Harding on my mind. This is not just Jeff Fennick going over there and putting on a great performance and winning a world title. This is in the heat of Las Vegas. First time he fought in America on a massive card against, as I said, the top 2 or 3 pound-for-pound fighter in the world at the time, and not just beat him. He broke him down and almost stopped him in the 12th and final round. And I don't care what the judges have to say about the event, about the fight. Jeff Fennick, in my opinion, won 8, if not 9 rounds of this fight and won handsomely and should be a 4-time world champion. I know it has sort of been overturned or whatever the hell they did with the WBC a few months back. But, I mean, you talk to Jeff, he knows he was ripped off, and I know he's flattered by getting the WBC sort of imaginary belt that they gave him, but he knows he'll never have the actual belt, and I feel so sorry for him because he should have been the first undefeated fighter ever to win titles in 4 weight divisions. So, to me, that is the second best performance by an Australian in a world title fight ever. Which brings us to number 1. No surprise here. I spoke about it earlier on in the show. For me, Jeff Horn with the 12-round decision over Manny Pacquiao, for me, is the greatest performance by an Australian fighter of all time. Now, again, as I said, regardless of whether you think he won or lost, I don't care. It was a close fight. Could have went either way. It could have been a draw. I don't think Manny did enough to win it. I think best case was maybe a draw for Manny, but I had Jeff Horn winning 7 rounds to 5. That's just my opinion. And the reason I put it over Jeff's fight with Azuma Nelson, Harding's fight with Andrees, and Cambosos' win over Lopez is simply the magnitude of his opponent. Now, no, it was in Australia, but you got to remember, this is a guy that was, I think he only had 13 or 14 fights or something, or it might have been a few more than that, whatever. It wasn't a lot of fights. It was under 20 at the time. 50-odd thousand people at the Suncorp Stadium. This is Manny Pacquiao across the ring from him, Showtime and all the pay-per-view and all that there. It would have been so daunting for Jeff Horn. He'd only been a pro for 5 years. So, and he's standing across the ring for Manny Pacquiao. And as I said earlier, he had no right to be in the ring standing across from Manny Pacquiao. It was a genius management of Dean Lonigan and David Higgins that got this fight across the line. Of course, Queensland government, the Australian government and everything else chipped in, so that was great. But Manny Pacquiao, a lot of people said he was shot. He won world titles after this fight and beat fighters like Keith Thurman, Adrian Broner, and was going to fight Errol Spence at the time. He went on and had fought Floyd Mayweather. No, sorry, Mayweather was 2 years earlier, sorry. But he beat Thurman and Broner after this, among others. So he still had a lot left in the tank. And not just that, he took Manny Pacquiao head on. Was almost stopped in the 9th round. What I will say about the 9th round, though, and if you haven't seen my episode on who you got as far as or what's your verdict, I did do this fight and I scored it. If you look at the 9th round closely, and a lot of people said it was a 10-8 round, it could have been stopped. I didn't see it that way at all. Look at it without the sound on, without the commentators yelling and screaming, without the crowd cheering. Manny Pacquiao didn't really land a lot of clean shots on Jeff Horn. Jeff Horn was exhausted. Yes, he was rattled. He was shaken. But at no stage, in my opinion, was he on the verge of being knocked down or knocked out. He was exhausted. He was on the back foot. Manny Pacquiao turned it on. And as I said, I just didn't see any really big punches landing. Yes, Manny Pacquiao won a definitive round, the 9th round, but I don't think it was anywhere near enough to get the 10-8 round. So even though Manny won that 10-9, I still thought Jeff did great to get through that. And not just get through the 9th round, will I say. He then won the 10th, 11th, and 12th rounds. That is just an amazing job by Jeff Horn to not only factor in the whole event, the magnitude of it all, and Manny Pacquiao as an opponent, as I said earlier, in the top 10 all-time fighters, pound for pound. Still at the peak of his powers. Yes, Manny Pacquiao took him lightly, but that's not Jeff Horn's fault. Took him on head-to-head, won the fight, survived the 9th round, won the 10th, 11th, and 12th rounds, and in my book, won the fight on a split decision. I had 7 rounds to 5, but I think Jeff Horn won the fight, and the fact of that is, for me, that is the greatest performance by an Australian ever in a world title fight. So I hope I've given you my reasons enough, and you're happy with that. Jules says, good to rate this, Lyndon. Good mix of performance over many errors. Thanks, mate. Apologies about the Opataya one. Bob Watson. Actually, what's that? I'll get in first. Harding Andrews. Okay, that's fine, mate. What did I have at number 3? So no argument at all there, Bob. Rose, Harding, Fennick, Mundine, Hector Thompson, all Australians. Yeah. Look, the Tony Mundine and Hector Thompson one there, Bob. Look, they were great performances, but they just weren't in the same sort of area as those other ones I put on there. The one category I want to do, Bob, and you'll probably, those couple of those will actually feature. I want to do the greatest performances or the greatest Australians ever to not win a world title. So I'm going to actually do that as well. I might even do it next week or the week after. The top 10 Aussies that never won world titles. There's a bit of a list. So who you got on that one? So interesting to hear your comments on that. I'm going to go back to your list here, Big J. Sorry about that. All right. So who we got, Big J? So we'll start at number 10, Green Jones Jr. Green Jones Jr. Yes, I did actually consider that, mate. And that's definitely got to be an honourable mention, so I apologise for that. Yep, no issue with that. Famishon Harada at number 9. Fennick Nelson, okay, at number 8. Solomon Sturm, number 7. Yes, I did have that as one of my honorary mentions as well there. Big J, yes. Michael Ellis, yep, a bit of a technicality there. I didn't put it on there. If you want to do another list, greatest Australian fights, just the fights themselves, featuring Australians either against each other or overseas, we can do that as well. 5 is George and Low TFML Lopez. Yep. 4 is Giant Breeders. No complaints there. Gill and Sturm. Yeah. Okay. Yep. Number 3. Not going to argue with that. 2 was Rose and Harada. And 1 was Jeff and Manny. Okay. So I'm glad you agree with that, mate. Yes, Bob, I know he was born in France. I know but it's a little bit different. It's like Lester Ellis, Barry Michael, born overseas, but raised in Australia and had his whole career in Australia and lived and died in Australia. Okay, that's my little asterisk for Johnny Famishon. I know Barry and Lester aren't in there, but that's my reasoning, Bob. As I said, he was born overseas, come here at a very young age, was raised by his parents here, started boxing here, had his whole career here, and then ultimately died here as well. So that's why he's still an Aussie for me, mate. Jules need a top 10 permanent residents, so we can include Costa. Okay, well, all right. Okay, to answer your question there, if you guys are thinking about it, where does the Costa fight? He could have had a few different fights in there, by the way. But for me, the Zab Judah fight is ultimately the number 1 performance of Costa's career. If I had to put that in the list there, Jules, I would have that at probably number 5. Okay, I still don't put it above Cambosis, Lopez, Harding Andrews, Fennick Nelson, or Horn Pacquiao. So at number 5, and that would probably knock out the Jeff Fennick Vector Colleges fight. So any of you guys seen Fennick Colleges? Did I get that right? Have a think about it. If you don't know anything about it, as I said, do your research on Victor Colleges as an opponent for Jeff and the beatdown that Jeff put on him to win that fight. And actually, when I interviewed Jeff, brought that up, and he actually agreed that Colleges was probably his toughest fight out of any of those guys that he ever fought. So, yeah, I know Bobby was born in Paris. Yeah, and yes, he's my version of an Australian. I hope I've explained it enough for you there, Bob. All right, so what I'll do next week, guys, if you've got another list that you want me to do, let me know. But I think I'll do that one, the greatest Australians to never win a professional world title. And there's a few of them out there, so I might do that next week. All right, and I also want to do at some stage. Yes, Bob, I know Alice was England and Michael was England, but I hope I've explained myself. Neither one of them in the list there, if you look at that. And Rocky Mattioli is probably another one, although I think he did go back home to Italy and fight professionally there, so I'm not going to include him. So I hope I've explained that, Bob Watson. Anyway, are you English by the way? English, Bob? Anyway, all right, guys, so next week, as I said, my list will be the best or the top 10 Aussies never to win a world title. I hope you enjoyed tonight's episode. Thanks again to Glen Jennings for coming on. Thanks to all you great people out there that have watched our videos. You haven't seen the video that happened on Saturday, check it out, myself and Tazzy. What's next for Tszyu after Tim Tszyu after what's happened. Obviously, Glenn's broken down a little bit further there, so make sure you check that out as well. And look out this weekend as well for the next version of next episode of What's Your Verdict. Well, there's one from Jules, top 10 managers of Aussie boxing. I like it. No, not too bad, Jules. We'll put that on the list as well. All right, guys. Well, thanks again for watching. Look forward to next Monday night. We're talking boxing. Have a good week. Thanks again.